Hey everyone, Future Ben here, and I want to bookend this upcoming critique and review of the novel Nevernight with my own thoughts in hindsight. I want to outright state that my opinions and views that I make within this upcoming video are my own, and I am fully aware and encourage you to disagree with me. These were my own thoughts while reading Nevernight, and I'm glad that we will have different experiences from reading the exact same novel. Without any further ado, here is my review of Nevernight.
Hello. I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write, where I give questionable writing advice through running metaphors. Today, I'm doing things a little differently in that I'll be reviewing the novel Nevernight and discussing whether or not you should read it. Short answer, probably not. See you next time. Wait, let me at least explain why. Nevernight is the first novel in J. Kristoff's dark fantasy trilogy known as the Nevernight Chronicles, in which we follow a teenage girl as she carves a path of death and destruction in the wake of her illustrious family's murder and imprisonment due to a failed revolution. We also watch as she becomes a full-fledged assassin. This series has been highly recommended to me, and in a lot of ways I can understand the praise that it receives. I, however, would have DNF'd the novel within the first chapter were it not for this review. As a general policy, though, I don't actually DNF books, but I do note those that I wish I had or should DNF. The novel takes place in a rich world heavily influenced by Italian cultures and locations, all of which I want to learn more about. Check, I'm in. It's a tale of betrayal leading the main character toward murder and mayhem. Check, all good. The main character attends a school for assassins, where everyone is aiming to stab the person next to them in the back. That all sounds like a captivating novel to me. At a high level, this novel has all it needs. In running terms, Nevernight felt like it was trying to set a personal record on a well-traveled course. Except everything combined together to somehow go wrong. All the pieces were there to create a great story between Nevernight's covers, and yet everything came together to be less than the sum of its parts, and something which I lost interest in. I will say that the active prose is beautiful, and I felt every action taken by Mia. As she was wandering down dark alleyways, I felt claustrophobic. When she was struggling to survive across a desert, I felt her desperation and dehydration. Mia is a compelling character and she has a very strong narrative voice. She certainly has a unique brand of dark humor and wit that comes through clearly in both her narration and her dialogue. She behaves as arguably a chaotic neutral character in that she does a great job of killing those in her way while also being kind-hearted to others to offset the damage she does. Granted, she does have a skewed sense of morals, and often the people she kills or harms, she didn't actually know whether or not they were evil. Don't worry, the novel does a good job either through the appendices or by a sudden switch in point of view to fully explain that the people she's killing or harming are terrible and in some ways deserve to suffer. There is a unique magic system based on shadows and blood within the Nevernight world, with high costs associated with its use. The blood magic can be used to teleport or heal or transfer communication across vast distances, whereas the shadow magic gets bestowed in very select individuals and can be used to control shadows or travel between them. Do you want an explanation for how shadows and blood relate, or what the limits of the magic system are? Well, tough. Even though magic is pivotal to the plot's key points, it's never fully explained the how or the why, short of that it was given by a spurned god. The novel also raised interesting questions, such as how we might be changed as a person if our physical appearance were altered, as assassins tend to do. How are we and our actions defined by how others perceive us? Mia brought up that very question, and then the novel went nowhere with it. Now I'm going to shift and elaborate on why I immediately wanted to put this book down, specifically due to its stutter start. The prologue, chapter 1 and chapter 2 are told in 3 distinct manners using 2 different narrators. The prologue is a generic introduction of legends where we are told that the main character Mia is important and that she will shape nations. Then chapter 1 begins and it jumps back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth between her previous night, which was an intimate moment, and the present where she's killing someone. For the descriptions of her previous night, they begin with rose-colored glasses where everything feels like a perfect moment, and then steadily descends into self-loathing and awkwardness until it matches with the verbiage used to describe her murdering someone. Chapter 1's hook is meant to drag us in with its visceral descriptions as it uses virtually the same phrases for sex and murder. A hook's goal is to convince readers to keep reading the novel, and only work when they aren't apparent. Given the shift in writing beginning in chapter 1 and continuing through the first third of the novel, chapter 1 felt like an obvious ploy and made me dislike the writing. For what it's worth, the hook does set the tone of the story well, though I lost more and more interest as I felt like I was rereading the same sentences without gaining new insight on the characters or plot, short of the fact that Mia is a cold, calculating killer. Mia continues the narration in chapter 2, which is split, with the first half being her backstory from several years ago, and the second half being a continuation of the story in the present. That 50-50 split continues through the first third of the novel. Ultimately, the way that this is being told, though, makes me feel like the book is hand-holding the reader. We will be told something, then told it again, and then have it explicitly explained. From Mia's hinted backstory, which gets steadily fleshed out, to the whodunit obvious betrayal, the story repeats itself. Then there are moments where, despite being in somebody's head, we will have a sudden shift in point of view to mislead readers. If the story believed in itself more, then the tension would already be there without having to resort to horror movie jump scares. The twists and red herrings were predictable, and the murderer was obvious from the start. The not so surprising surprises are typical in young adult novels, though given Nevernight's content and language, it is clearly meant for a more mature audience. That is where this story falters. Given the way it's told and how the events unfold, it seems like it's written for a young audience, which is in a direct conflict with the content itself. Those are harsh criticisms and are obviously my own opinion. Now, the story does pick up significantly after the first third is done, so if you feel inclined to read Nevernight, you can start in chapter 10 without missing too much. A lot of those details beforehand are largely unnecessary or get reiterated later. Chapter 10 was a masterful hook. The action and underpinning themes performed considerable work with succinct wording. I learned much more about the characters based on how they fight and the weapons they use than at any other point in the story. The well-written and suspenseful chapter provided meaningful subtext while also giving great visuals for most of the characters. Even the style was consistent with the remainder of the novel, making it a perfect hook. Now I'm going to shift to a small rant about the setting. And maybe it's that I read Shadow of the Gods right before this novel, but having a city built on top of a dead god the second time around seemed a little trite. So much so that I was poking holes at the improbability of using a giant rib bone as foundation for apartments. Yes, this is a fantasy realm, but some asks are just too much for me to want to believe in. And the more it felt like it was going for shock and awe with these wonderfully beautiful set pieces, the more it felt like it was trying too hard. The novel would have been better suited by having more confidence in its lore and style. For example, the story would have been better if the prologue weren't included. This seemed to only perform 2 tasks, namely adding to the stakes by explicitly telling us that it involves somebody important, and to justify the appendices which act as world building when the novel doesn't do enough of it. As for the writing style, much of the verbiage and content felt like it was in there to sound cool rather than because it served the story. All in all, I felt like this plot and the characters and the locations and everything that I mentioned before was better done elsewhere. See, Shadow of the Gods. That being said, I'm going to give this book a generous rating of 3 out of 5 because it does eventually become a compelling revenge story, and Mia's unique narration carries the weight of the story on her shoulders.
Hey everyone, I'm back as Future Ben to give an update on my initial rating. Having finished the trilogy and seen where it goes and how it treats certain events, I'm going to lower my initial rating of 3 out of 5 to what I consider to still be generous, 2 out of 5. I will let the series literally speak for itself because that's right, in the third novel, the characters pause the story to read Nevernight and Godsgrave and gain knowledge that they would not have had otherwise. Then they provide their own commentary. Worse, the versions of these novels in canon did not technically exist yet because the characters found them in the Library of Never Was. Still with me? Great. Here are 3 different characters, or more accurately, reader stand-ins, critiquing the novels that they themselves are a part of. It's not that bad, I mean, if you don't mind footnotes enough. A little cursing. Some of the metaphors are a bit much. And the worst commentary. If he being the Chronicles narrator, sounded this pretentious when he opened his mouth, I'd have murdered him years ago.
With that out of the way, here's my spoiler-filled prediction based on Nevernight for what the remaining 2 novels will contain. Spoilers begin now, and I'll include a timestamp for when the spoilers stop. 3, 2, 1, okay. As we never see a body, Trick is clearly still alive. And despite the canonical author telling us in the prologue that Mia is going to die, she'll end the series perfectly fine having faked her death to live with the one she loves. The author may outright be lying to us to protect Mia, and she's living out her peaceful life with Trick. Once Trick has fully healed, that will free up Ashlyn to join Mia's party because their goals will align in taking out the Church of Assassins, which is clearly evil. Sceva and Duomo have been hiring the Church of Assassins, as alluded to in the appendices, to take out their rivals. Now, this specifically includes Mia's father, who was the leader of the Revolutionary Army and was extracted from the center of the army's camp under mysterious circumstances and later put to death. So once Mia's goals align with Ashlyn's and Trick's to take out the church, that's what they're going to do, and then they're going to kill Sceva and Duomo. After taking out the church and Sceva and Duomo, that will free up Mia to bring the moon back, as they did in a much better written dark fantasy trilogy, which I'm not going to name specifically because that would be spoilers, and I'm only trying to spoil the plot of Nevernight in these predictions. But with the moon back, that will bring balance to the world. In defying the Three-Eyed God, Mia will appear to die, only to come back as I previously explained. And that's how the story will end. Also, her brother is alive and for some reason has a right to rule. So Mia will create a new nation after killing Sceva and Duomo, and then her brother will lead that new nation to an era of prosperity. That's all I have for my predictions on the remaining 2 novels of the Nevernight Chronicles. I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write. Have you read Nevernight, and what did you think of it? Do you agree with my opinions, or is everything I said wrong and misguided? Let me know in those comments below. I also post my running and writing thoughts on social media, so be sure to follow along and join in with your own comments. Next week, I'll be reviewing the 2nd novel in the trilogy called Godsgrave, so be sure to come back and discover if everything I've said is wrong and if the series redeemed itself. See you next time. Until then, read Nevernight and judge it for yourself.